is there. Power is there. And the joy is there. So thank God for that. The title of my sermon this afternoon is Power is for Service. Power is for service. Without power or energy, nothing moves. There would be no human progress. We would all be like stones, permanently fixed. This is why we say stones are lifeless, lifeless things. Even though I think stones too have a different kind of life. I think stones have a different kind of life. And that there is movement, possibly that is invisible to our naked eyes. They have a life, they have a function. And but when we look at them, they seem to be lifeless. However, we all need some power to live and to survive, and there are different types of power. Namely, there's physical power, we talk of solar power, water power, military power, economic power, spiritual power, political power, managerial power, intellectual power, love power, nuclear power. And these days we speak of hard power and soft power in politics. You see? President Obama has used soft power in his foreign policy. President Bush believed in hard power. All those sort of powers. Apart from power that is source of energy for technological development, the power to dominate others has been the most desired and the most used in human relationships. Power to dominate. This is true in interpersonal relationships, and there is what has been called the pecking order in society. Pecking order, in other words, there is a series of how power is arranged. In most societies, age has been the measure of this power to dominate in those relationships. And so when you meet, you go to a meeting and you arrive there, very often you look around, who is the oldest here? Should be given the seat first, or should be given food first, or should be given the right to speak first. I was heading an organization, a book publishing organization in Malawi. And there was one officer who didn't recognize this pecking order. So we would go very often, possibly if there was a death affecting a member of staff, we would go to condole. And very often it was expected that, being the general manager, once I have spoken, that was the last word. But somehow I would speak and this officer would come behind me and speak again. So it kept on going like that. And so the other members of staff nicknamed him the Deputy General Manager. You see? However, the behavior was going on, and so one time he did something which annoyed me. Yeah, he was going somewhere. So he came to my office to say, I am going out. I said, fair enough. So as he goes out, at the door, he points his finger. I am going, like this. I am going to do something. I called him back and said, to whom are you speaking? That you can point a finger from the door like that. And so I began to dress him down and expose his behavior that it was unacceptable. And then he came very apologetic. I'm very sorry, sir. I didn't know and nobody told me that I was making mistakes. You are the first person to tell me. He breached the pecking order. So, in some of the societies, I understand, a son is a son. And if he makes a mistake, no matter he has got children of his own father can come and give him spanking. You see? He has authority. He has the power. And society expects him, the father, to do that. Because there is that pecking order. Now, we all create our pecking orders. Among the universities, there are certain universities which are considered the first. These belong to a class of their own. So you go for Yangon University in Taiwan, the top university. The National University of Taiwan, top university. Chamrong Tashi comes the terrain. The terrain. In America, it's the same. You have the Ivy League universities. Harvard, Yale, Chicago, Stanford, California, whatever it is, they belong to a class of their own. The rest come behind. Alright? Even within globally, universities have been arranged. There's number 1, number 2, and you go on. This is what we expect. This is what we do. In sports, the same thing. Top clubs, middle clubs, bottom clubs. And there's always the fear of being relegated to the bottom and the fight very hard. Indeed, possibly Taiwan makes a lot of good things, quality things. But when Taiwanese come to think about it, they also think that German craftsmanship is better. So they emulate to become like Germans. You do the way the Germans do. Don't make your things the way China does. There is that pecking order. So there's always a fighting to get to the top. And try to remain at the top as much as possible. So today we are considering the matter of power and its proper use, as Jesus redefines that use for us, for the church, and for the world. Jesus actually reverses the common understanding of what power is for. And in his own life, in his own activities, and in his own teaching, he supported the weak and the vulnerable against the strong, backed by self-serving ideologies. Very often when people are dominant and are dominating, they create force-serving ideologies. They try to explain why things are the way they are. And they keep creating these ideologies. Now, the disciples were operating from the same mindset as everyone else, to gain power and to enjoy its fruit, a life of leisure, exploitation, and domination. They wanted to escape from a life of toil and servitude, of always fighting to survive. Such a life was often found in the capitals of the nations in those days, in Rome, in Jerusalem, in Damascus, in Athens, in Alexandria. This is where people were jockeying for power and trying to get to the top of power. Within the Roman Empire, there were so many assassinations because people wanted power. So many assassinations. And so some of the emperors were there for a few months, some for just a few years, very few who were there for a long time. Because everybody wanted to get to the power. And so, we find that possibly in Taiwan here, most of the power is in Taipei. And the remaining power is distributed a little in Tainan, a little in Kaohsiung, a little in Hualien and Pindong, Tadong and Taichung. But most of the power is in Taipei. So if you want to share in that power, don't remain in these background cities, go to Taipei and fight it there and rise there. So this is where you're going, either political power, economic power, educational power, you name it, it's up there. So if anyone wants to enjoy what political power and military power brings, then one has to live in the capital of our nations. The disciples wanted also to be part of that power. They wanted to be part of that power. Now, especially at this particular time, the passage we have read from Mark, Jesus is moving towards Jerusalem. He has been on ministry for 3 years. And he is talking to them about confronting the other powers that control Jerusalem. And there is a lot of excitement. The other thing I would like us to know is the fact that the disciples were mostly, very likely, younger than Jesus was. Jesus was about 33 at this particular time. Now, what we see is this, that among them, Peter was the only one we know he was married, because he had a mother-in-law. However, most of the disciples would have been in their 20s. If old enough, mid-20s. If too young, possibly barely end of teenage period. And so they were a very young group. And we know when you have this kind of group, there's a kind of immaturity about it. The way they fight over small things. And it seems as if this issue of who was the greatest was always an issue they debated about, was an issue that they kept bringing back, and there was an issue that seemed to be a great concern to them. so that's why I say sometimes when you look at the picture of the Last Supper, the painting of the Last Supper, some of the paintings do not give us the correct idea. Because you see the people seated around that table are old people. Gray-haired people. And Jesus is the youngest. It's really the reverse of what the reality was. You know? And I think that's why they were bickering about power. Who's going to be the greatest? Who was going to save the other people? All right. Now, the issue became very hot to the point that James and John decided to make an appointment with Jesus to discuss the issue of power. So, what we see is this, that they come to Jesus, and the Gospel of Matthew says actually they came with their mother. And then they said, promise, you are going to do whatever we ask you to do for us. You hear that? Those of you who have kids around and you know their children, that's a very good technique children use. They will come and look you in the face and smile, and you're suspecting they have an agenda. And so they put a condition, except what we are going to ask you. So Jesus said, all right, what is it that you want me to do for you? Now, when you take over the government and you choose your cabinet, one of us should be on your right side, another one on your left side. Wow. Jesus is surprised. But anyway, Jesus responds and says, you do not know what you're asking. You do not know what you are asking. And then he said, all right, are you prepared to drink the cup that I am to drink? And very often when the scriptures speak about the cup, it's always the expression of the cup of suffering. In the past, in a lot of societies, in cases of murder, when you killed somebody, but you are a suspect for killing somebody, the only way they could decide whether you are the person or not was to give you a cup of poison. That made you suffer. And very often they give you a cup of poison so that before you drink it, you may have a chance to say, I'm sorry, I did it. I don't want to drink this thing. But if you continue refusing, then the poison ordeal is going to decide. If you survive, you didn't do it. If you die, you did it. But in both cases, you suffer a lot from drinking that poison. You suffer a lot from drinking that poison. And so it becomes a cup of suffering. And then he speaks about, are you ready to be baptized with the baptism I'm going to be baptized with? The word baptizo in Greek means to dip. And here he is referring to his own death. Are you willing to die the death that I am going to die? And they say, oh yeah, well, we are ready, we can do that. And then to their disappointment, Jesus says, yes, the cup you are going to drink, the baptism you are going to receive, but it's not for me to give these chairs to the right or to the left. This is left to my Father to decide. It's not in my power. Now, a few things that we can learn from that encounter, that conversation. The disciples made the wrong assumptions. Several wrong assumptions. One, that Jesus was going to be the political Messiah, and therefore they were going to be in these great administrative positions when Jesus takes over the politics of Israel at that particular time. The second assumption is this, that as far as they are concerned, they did not quite understand what the mission of Jesus was. They were ignorant, and Jesus tells them, you do not know what you are asking. Even though Jesus had started throwing hints and preparing them for what was going to happen in Jerusalem, their minds were completely unable to understand, because they were so much preoccupied about becoming his big people in this big government. So, they made the wrong assumptions. And so Jesus had to put them straight. Somehow the word managed to get to the other disciples that these two guys had gone to Jesus asking for this favor. And the other disciples became furious. How could you do this? We thought we were all together in this. And then you separate yourself to go and ask this particular favor. And the whole group was in a state of tension. So Jesus has to come and explain what it all means. Now, there was a time when, because this was not the first time this thing had happened, another time when they were talking about who was the greatest, and Jesus overhears, and then they are at the place and they says, what were you talking about? And they're quiet, they don't want to say. And so Jesus took a young boy, brought him right in the middle, and said, if you want to be the greatest, you must act like this little boy. So this was almost the second or third time that this problem was among the disciples. So Jesus has to teach them what it means to have power and what his power was all about. So, as I've said, they had the wrong assumptions about power and its use. This is what was causing them to act the way they were doing, making it a point of contention all along. And so Jesus says to them, the rulers of the Gentiles love to lord it over their people. In other words, those who are in power among the Gentiles and those who are working for them, they love to make sure the people who are under that rule feel their power, feel their authority. But he said, this should not happen among you. They were to operate in a different manner, on different principles. And they were going to act according to the rule of the kingdom of God, which was different from the way human societies operate in their politics. According to the rule of the kingdom of God, the greatest becomes the servant of all. The first becomes the slave of all. And for their model, the Son of Man's mission was not to boast over others, but to serve to the point of making his own life a ransom for many. He became a servant who was used to ransom many who needed redeeming. This redemption was from political oppression, economic exploitation, psychological manipulation, social marginalization, intellectual or ideological corruption, but more than that, from spiritual alienation that was responsible for these other evils under which humanity was suffering. And Jesus presents himself as a model for that kind of work. In the sense that in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, Jesus actually washes the disciples' feet. And in washing the disciples' feet, he was taking the role of a slave. In those societies, only slaves could wash the visitors' feet as they came to visit. And so, Jesus washes the disciples' feet, and Peter protested. You are not going to wash my feet, because Peter understood the implication of what Jesus was doing. You are not going to wash my feet. But Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you are not part of me. You have no part in me. And then Peter says, oh, not only my feet. I want more of you. So even my head and my body. You know, there was that little argument. But after washing the disciples' feet, Jesus stands up and says, do you see what I have done? You also do the same here. Washing each other's feet. Now, the passage from the Hebrews, it speaks about Jesus being chosen by God. He did not demand the role he was to play, the way James and John did. And so, because of his obedience to God, Jesus is elevated to become to this high honor, of which the writer says, the order of Melchizedek. Now, up to now, we don't really know who that Melchizedek was. We meet him in Genesis. Abraham has just come to rescue Lot, and Melchizedek comes as the priest king of Salem, of Jerusalem. And Abraham offers to him 1/10 of all that he had captured. That's all the time we meet this Melchizedek. The next time he's mentioned is in the Psalms, where he is mentioned. Now, the name Melchizedek in Hebrew means king of righteousness. and being priest king of Salem. Salem means peace. So he is a king, a priest, who is priest king associated with peace, associated with righteousness. And so Jesus achieves that high office. And the writer says, because he was obedient to God. Because he was obedient to God. And he did not seek a cabinet post for himself. Quite a contrast between James and John. And then Isaiah. We see again working what is called this power that Jesus was talking about. The power of non-violence. The power that serves. So, the passage we read in Isaiah 53 is one of what is called the 4 servant songs in Isaiah. And one of the 4 servant songs. The first servant song is Isaiah 42, verse 1 to 4. The second servant song is Isaiah 49, 1 to 6. The third servant song is Isaiah 50, verse 4 to 9. And the fourth is Isaiah 52, verse 13, to chapter 53, verse 12. And that's the longest servant song. In that servant song, we see the suffering servant who takes up or participates in people's suffering. Secondly, a servant who feels their sorrow and identifies himself with the cause of their suffering. Thirdly, a servant who bears humiliation and victimization on their behalf. Fourthly, a servant who suffers oppression and affliction, but also patiently working for righteousness, for justice to come out as a result in the end. He is a servant who is misunderstood and also misrepresented. He is a servant who responds non-violently. And then he is a servant who seeks and sticks to doing the will of God. Who seeks and sticks to doing the will of God. This is the servant that Jesus, the servanthood that Jesus is talking about. Not the servant that seeks to dominate, seeks to exploit, seeks to manipulate, seeks power for itself, but rather a servant, a leader, power that seeks to serve other people, power that seeks to reach out to those who are vulnerable and to protect those who are suffering. That is the power that Jesus is talking about. And so in Psalm 91, we are assured of our security. Once we adopt this attitude of power, because the world will always say that's stupidity. You cannot be in a world like that, that's stupid. Yeah? And so they will laugh at us, they will call us names. Very often when Jesus says, when they hit you on one and turn the other cheek, he says, that does not work in this world. In this world, you need hard power. In this world, you need power that is going to prevent other people from undermining your own power. And Jesus says that's not the way to live, that's not the way to sustain life, that's not the way to find happiness. And we can see it. Syria is a good example. The president of Syria is trying to use the hard power as much as possible. And what he's doing is killing his own people, destroying his own country. You don't go and bomb cities, your own country. The other thing is this, that he has misunderstood the whole movement for political freedom in Syria. How come people come to look for freedom and they are demonstrating for freedom and you call them terrorists? Children and women, men and women unarmed, you call them terrorists. And then unleash bombs over these people. The whole army to kill them. It's a good example of a power that has gone wrong. Power to dominate. It does not work. It does not work. You should ask the United States when they were in Vietnam. It did not work. It did not work. It does not work. But you see, nations never learn. Never learn. But Jesus said there's a way in which we can create peace. Power that works for those who are vulnerable, those who are weak, those who are marginalized. That's the power that we need. That's the power that Jesus came to demonstrate. So, in Psalm 91, it says, when power is used the way Jesus taught it should be used, then we are assured of God's support, as we read in Psalm 91, verse 9 to 6. No harm will befall you, no disaster come near you. God's angels will be at your service to protect you. You will be a victor over dangerous situations, over lions and snakes, vicious lions and poisonous snakes. You will be protected from that. God is committed to your security. God will answer you when you call. God will be present even in your troubles. He will not leave you. He will not abandon you. God will deliver you and honor you. God will make your life long. God will show you His salvation. A salvation that is forever, because even death has been defeated. When we use power the way Jesus said we should use it, it is a power that reaches out and saves rather than a power that destroys. Many people, even in the places of work, the moment you challenge their decisions, the moment you want to provide an alternative way to doing things, they will come and show you their power. I will destroy you. Be careful what you say, what you do. And so very often people work under fear. There's a lot of abuse of power in our administrative systems. A lot of abuse. People behave as if they are little gods. People behave as if they are going to be there forever. One thing we learned it from our former president in Malawi. he was becoming rude and arrogant, as if he was a small god. And when he died suddenly, the whole country rejoiced. I went there, everybody was saying, this is God's intervention. We're so happy. He's dead. You know, because the way he was holding power within the country. And the worst thing was that he gave the British High Commissioner 48 hours to leave the country. Because the British High Commissioner had written that this president is not listening to advice. Just for that. And he said, get out of my country. 48 hours. Now, even if you are powerful, you don't do those sort of things. Then, of course, the British High Commissioner left. But the British High Commissioner, the European Union and America, they are all working together and they started closing all the taps, financial taps. Close, 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 close. There was crisis. Real crisis. So here it is that if he was somebody who was humble enough and looked at himself as a servant of the people, possibly he would still be president. But after he was dead, then they discovered he had suitcases and suitcases of money, foreign currency. He had built himself a huge mansion. Where he got that money, nobody knows. Because before he became president, we all knew him. He was a poor man. You see. But power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, as somebody said. So Jesus is presenting power that builds community. Power that is used to serve those who are less fortunate so that they too can enjoy, can breathe easier. When power is for service, righteousness spreads, suffering is alleviated, peace is prevalent, people prosper in every aspect of their lives. Love controls social interaction instead of selfishness. Communities are strengthened and intellectual creativity benefits many people. And God is with us since we are on God's side. May this be true of us in the church and in the world. Love is that power that Jesus spoke. Let us pray.